Hey everybody, welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam and welcome to part 3 of our 4-part series of how to 3D print for beginners. In this video, we're going to cover how to slice our model in Cura, and then we're going to cover in the next video the actual 3D printing process. If you are new to Cura, this is the video for you. Let's go. All right, now we are in Cura. Now this is the slicer software, and this is how we're going to tell our 3D printer how to print the model. So if you don't have Cura already, you can go to the Cura website, or I believe it's the Ultimaker website, and you can download Cura for free. And again, I'm on a Mac, but you can get it on PC as well. Or Windows as well. So we have this blank slate here. Now let me just walk you through a little bit of this in case you are unfamiliar. So this is our workspace, and what this represents is our 3D printer print bed. And you can see right on there it says Ender, and that's the first thing we want to make sure. If you have multiple 3D printers, or if you have not set up Cura for the first time, you want to make sure that that you go and you match up your 3D printer. So in this case, you can see I have some different printers here. I have my CR10, and we don't want that one. We want Ender 3, and the reason why that's important is because the print beds are different sizes, and so there's some factors about that, and some other factors, not just the size of the print bed. Anyway, you want to make sure that it's set up for your correct printer. So if you need to go into the settings and change that, you can do that. Also, over here on the right-hand side, that's our main. This is where all of our settings are. That's the pretty much your main area that you're going to be working in most of the time. And we'll go into every single one of these, and we'll just work our way through. Just to give you, I guess, as a reference point. Just in case you're curious what all these kind of different modes do. We definitely won't be going in depth in everything, because that's like several videos. And again, check the description below for more 3D printing resources. But anyway, you'll see here on the profile, I have a lot of different profiles, but one that is pretty much my standard is, I call it AT Mix 4 PLA, and that is what we're going to be printing with. We're going to be printing with PLA, some 3D Fuel PLA, and so that's how I have this one set up, and we'll get into all of that in just a second. Hey, real quick, if you feel like you're getting value out of this content and you want to see it continue and support this content so that other people can freely enjoy it, consider donating to RC with Adam at ko-fi.com/RCwithAdam. That's kofi.com/RCwithAdam. Thank you so much. Okay, now we need to get our model, our STL file that we downloaded, into Cura. So if we go to the top left corner, we can click this little folder icon. We have our download right there, our Swiss motor mount. We click on that, we click open, and shazam bam, it is right there in the middle of our workspace. Now, as far as navigation, you can select with the left mouse, and then the right mouse, you can orbit around. Now, right now, we're not actually centered on this model. So if we click on the model, it will automatically center the view. And similar to Tinkercad, you can either do shift right click, or you can press and hold like the little clicker wheel. If you have a scroll wheel on your mouse that can click, that's how I'm moving around side to side in this view. So generally you just want it to kind of be centered on your model, so then you can rotate around it, and I'm zooming in with the scroll wheel. But they're down here at the bottom left. It gives you some different like set views. So that's kind of nice if you want to have a specific view of the model, like a side view, a right view, top view, bottom view, etc. Also, you'll see right here these little bars. These we have green, blue, and red. Those show the different axes of the 3D printer. So green is going to be the y-axis, which is kind of going away from us. The red is the x-axis, which goes left and right, and the blue is the z-axis, which goes up and down. And that's really important. Well, one reason it's important, in this case, it tells us where the front of the printer is. So in this case, we are looking at the print bed as though we would be looking at the the printer in real life. So that works out well. So that gives us an idea as far as like where we want to move the model. And I'm just clicking, left clicking on the model and dragging it to move it around. And there's different things you can do with this model as far as snapping it to the print bed. If you look over on the left-hand side, you can change a lot of things. Like right now, we're changing the actual position of the model. You can also change the scale of the model. You can scale it. You can do snap rotation. So in this case, where you could rotate the model. Things like that. So if you wanted to print on its side. Now, why would you not want to print in this orientation? And when I say orientation, I mean like how the model is oriented in regards to the print bed. So in this case, we have this overhang. You see right like where that red triangle is? That's an overhang, and you don't really want overhangs because you have to support overhangs most of the time, most overhangs. So let's say if you had a model that was in this orientation and you wanted to change that, a really great way is to click this button right here. It says select face to align to build plate. And all you have to do is click that, and then you select which face of the model. Somehow it knows. It's amazing. And then you can just click that and it will automatically align that on the build plate. So that's really cool. And we are going to print this in this order, and make sure you got to make sure you are in the correct like if the correct mode, I guess you could say, in order to like move this around or scale it, because these little arrows and stuff will do different things based on which mode you're in. So anyway, just be sure to check that, because otherwise you might end up scaling this thing like way up. You'll be like, oh my gosh, what happened? Anyway, but that's a cool tool though, the scaling tool. Anyway, there are a lot of other things that you can do that we are not going to cover in this video. But right now, this is in a good spot. It's a good orientation. And over here on the right-hand side where it says print settings, I already have my profile that I like, which is like basically a baseline profile. And I might change the settings depending on the model if I want to change a specific thing. So let me show you. If you click on the bottom right button where it says slice, that's going to basically work its magic and show you if you hit preview. Sometimes it'll do it automatically, but it tells you information like it estimates that it will take 1 hour and 24 minutes, which is actually, this thing might actually end up being like way beefier than I kind of had intended, but we'll have to see how it turns out, because 1 hour and 24 minutes is kind of a while for this small thing. It's going to weigh 9 grams, so that it suggests. And if you look on the right, the very most right-hand side, hopefully you can see this. I'm going to move the screen just to make sure that it shows up. On the right-hand side, this is very important. This is a little not a wheel. It's a scroll bar. And this allows you to go up and down the model layer by layer, because that's how it prints. It prints layer by layer. And so this way we can get, we can like see exactly what the printer is going to do for every single layer. It's pretty amazing. And so, you'll get better with this, and you'll learn what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. But one thing to notice is the reason why I'm printing this model in this orientation is because I want to have, you see how these long, sort of strands, I guess you could say, or these long runs of plastic, they're going, we're printing the bottom plate pretty much all in one go. So we're going to do, I think 3 layers. And then those orange lines are infill. That's what they call infill. So think of it kind of like, sort of like internal supports. And that's actually probably kind of a lot of infill, probably. And then it's going to do another top layer. So that way, basically, the infill is so that it's not a solid object, because if it was solid, it would take even more plastic and weigh more, and you don't always need it to be solid. And then here you can see on the edges, like on the supports and on the front, you can see that it actually prints it as one continuous piece. So it's not like it prints 2 separate items. So we're going to have a lot of strength with this continuous run of filaments, and then the orange bits there, which I'm not sure if I guess they'll help. They'll do something, but that's the infill. And so, yeah, like I feel like if I had made this maybe 2 millimeters thick, that might have been better, and then I wouldn't have to do infill. So that's part of why it's going to take so long, because it has to make those extra movements. And then if we scroll to the front here, you can see that first screw mount hole is being made, and then so you see we have a gap here. So it's going to be a little bit weaker right there because there's a gap in between the filament. But then once it closes, it's going to be very strong because it's actually filling it in all the way right above that hole. So that should be good. And then it's doing that again for the middle hole, and then all the rest of them. So we're just kind of checking through here, making sure that it's going to print like how I think it should print. And then another trick that you could do, like let's say we want to print a little bit faster, and I feel like this bottom plate is just too thick. It doesn't need to be so thick. It doesn't need to be 3 millimeters, let's say. What I could do actually is right here where it says Z-axis, we could actually type in -1, and the model will actually move. I don't know if you can really see it. Can't really see it, but I actually moved the entire model down below the build plate by 1 millimeter. And so what that'll do is anything below the build plate, yeah, you can kind of see it's grayed out underneath there. Anything below the build plate will not be printed. So now it's only going to print 2 millimeter thick bottom plate. And then, well, it saved us like 4 minutes. So not a whole lot of time there, but it could be helpful. So you might be wondering, what is this teal, or whatever you call it, this bluish greenish line around it? That's called a skirt, and that is we'll talk about that setting in just a moment. Okay, now let's run through all of these profile settings. Again, this is my custom profile that I have changed for this particular printer. So some of these settings are going to be printer specific, and you will need to change them for your printer based on like the type of printer you have, the type of extruder, and those sorts of things. And we won't cover a lot of that stuff in this video right now, but let's run through these just to give you an idea. So the layer height is going to be 0.2. That's pretty standard. Any more than that, and it's going to be really rough, and you might not have good adhesion. Any less than that, or any closer together that the layers are, it's going to take a lot longer to print, but it will look better and might be stronger. But in this case, it should be fine. The line width, that's going to be 0.4. That's based on our nozzle, so we're using a 0.4 nozzle. And then all these other things, and you can kind of change there's so many parameters that you can change. It's crazy. Also, if you click on this little settings button, it shows you like all of you can actually just search through all of the settings, and it will show you which ones you want visible, and which, like, if you want to have like full customization, or if you just want to do like a more of a simple kind of layout. In fact, right here, it says custom selection, basic, advanced, expert. So right now I just have custom selection because I guess I don't need everything to show on here. But in any case, the quality, that's what that's going to be right there that we just talked about. Shell, the shell is like the outside. So that's going to be like the walls. So if I scroll down here and I zoom in, the red and yellow, that's going to be the shell. And again, we're not going to go through every single one of these, but right now I have the wall line count to 3, and the wall is, you can see there's the red, which is the outside, and then the 2 green, and so that's going to be 1, 2, 3 for the wall. And you can just play with this. Like, I mean, look, if we said, let's say we want the wall count to be 6, let's see what happens. And we hit slice and then preview. So look at that. That's just all walls, baby. It's just solid walls. And that will be actually, oh shoot, that only takes 1 hour and 26 minutes. That's interesting. Okay, so this is a good example. So like in this case, it doesn't take that much longer to print all walls. In some cases, it might be faster than printing, and then instead of printing like 3 walls and then the infill, because the infill just takes so many extra movements. So honestly, maybe we should just print walls. Sure, let's just do it. Let's print, why not? Let's do it. Let's print walls. So you can see that's pretty crazy actually, because we have, so you can see right there on the circles, you can definitely see how many walls there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 walls right there on that circle. And then there's like a lot of other little intricate details that you probably don't need to worry about unless you're having like an issue with the printing. The infill, that's that orange stuff. That's like the grid pattern. You can change the type of grid pattern. You can change the infill density. Right now it's 10%. I usually do 10%. That's pretty common. Let's do like, let's do 5%, because maybe you want to save filament. Maybe you don't need as much infill. Yeah, and I'm kind of feeling like, yeah, sure, let's try 5%. Why not? Let's try 5%. Usually it saves a little bit of time, saves a little bit of filament. But you do need to keep in mind sometimes, like, depending on how your top layer, like that right there, that would be your top layer. You can also use your arrow keys to go up and down layer by layer. So that right there, that yellow, that's your top layer. And if your infill is not dense enough, you might have sagging, or you might have problems with the top layer being supported. Anyway, I feel like this is getting into way more detail than you probably want to know about or are ready to learn about, since we're just doing like a beginner thing. But anyway, you can change a lot of stuff with the infill, all kinds of stuff. Here we have material. Now this part definitely matters. This is based on the filament you are using. So printing temperature 215, that's probably good. Let's step it up to 220 for the filament that I'm using, the 3D Fuel filament. The build plate temperature, 60 degrees Celsius. Oh, and all these temperatures are in Celsius, so not Fahrenheit, Celsius. 60 degrees Celsius, that is pretty common. Let's see here. And flow is basically how much volume of filament is being extruded. So we just have that at 100% for everything except for the skirt or brim, and that is those lines on the outside right here, these bluish lines. Though that's the in this case that's the skirt. A brim would be like right next to the object, which is intended to help keep it adhered to the bed. But in this case, we're just doing a skirt, and that's so that the filament can kind of just get flowing out of the nozzle and work out any little bubbles or anything that might be in the filament or the nozzle, and get like a nice clean filament flow. Also, the initial layer flow. So the very first layer, that layer right there, is set to 105% flow rate. So basically that way we get a little bit more flow so that these lines will stick together better and adhere to the print bed a little bit better as well. Man, I feel like a super nerd talking about all of these things and going through them, but I hope this is helpful to you and you haven't just already turned off the video, because this is a lot of information. So don't worry if you don't like get all this stuff right away. That's totally fine. Print speed, I have it set to 50 millimeters per second. I like to print pretty slowly. I'm a pretty slow printer, I would say. So infill speed 35, wall speed 25, outer wall speed 25, 25, 25. Travel speed is 150. Now, here's a really important thing. Initial layer speed, turn that way down, because that is your most important layer. If the first layer does not stick, just forget about it. Forget about everything else, because it all depends on that first layer. So for the first layer, or the initial layer, I have that set to 10 millimeters per second. And let's see, and the number of slower layers is 2, actually. So the first 2 layers print at 10 millimeters per second. And then there's some other numbers just for your reference there. And I can't remember, I might have changed some of those, or maybe not. Okay, next we have travel. Travel, this is more like printer specific. If you're getting, weird issues, cosmetic issues or otherwise with your print, then you might want to adjust these. Like if you're getting a lot of stringing or something like that, and kind of play around with them. But again, it's very printer specific. Cooling, that's your cooling fan. that actually cools the filament, the plastic, as it is being printed. And so what I have here, so maximum is 100%, but then normally it's set to 30%, so not that much. Because usually you for a lot of things you really don't even need a cooling fan, but it can improve the print quality in some cases depending on the filament and all this other stuff. So I have it set to normally 30, which is not very much, but I also have it set so that if, let's see, where is it? So if you fan speed okay, so regular maximum fan speed threshold. So if the layers are taking less than 10 seconds to print, the fan speed will increase gradually up to the maximum amount. And that's because, like, if you're printing a shorter, if it takes less time to print a shorter layer, then usually that means you need more cooling because you might be printing an overhang or something like that. All right, support. So we don't need any supports. Supports are basically sacrificial filament so that you can actually support an overhang. So a part that would otherwise just be free floating over nothing, you need to print a support. Not all the time, but certainly sometimes. Build plate adhesion. Now this is where I was talking about the skirt and the brim. Right now it's set to skirt. The line count is set to 2 because we're just kind of wasting plastic otherwise. So it's just set to 2. The skirt distance is how far away from the actual model those lines of plastic will be. Those initial, kind of call them, practice lines, I guess. And then the skirt or brim length, that's set to 250, but that's overridden by the line count, I think. And then let's see. So then we have dual extrusion. Actually, we don't need. Why is that even on there? That's weird. Yeah, I don't have dual extrusion, so we don't need dual extrusion. I'm not sure why that's there. Mesh fixes. So this is, again, more advanced stuff. Honestly, I don't even really mess with this very much. I haven't messed with mesh fixes. That would be like if you have some sort of issue with the actual model that you need to fix. Special modes, you can do print sequence. So if you have multiple items, you could just print one item and then print another. But typically you print everything layer by layer. So you do one layer on this item, one layer on that item, one layer on another item. And so it just depends on how you want to do that. Other options, spiralize outer contour. You want to do that if you want to print a vase. It's also called vase mode or vase mode. Some people call it that, but in here it's called spiralize outer contour, and it basically just prints one layer thickness around the entire model, and it doesn't ever stop. It just prints it in a spiral going upwards. So that's really cool because then you don't have layer lines, or you don't have a seam in your model. It's like seamless. It's very cool. But that's only useful if you're printing a vase, pretty much. Anyways, there's some other stuff there. We're not going to mess with that right now. And then you have experimental. And experimental, I mean, they call it experimental, but it's not that experimental. But you can do all kinds of different stuff as well. That's also how you change the coasting as well, which coasting, it doesn't seem experimental anymore, but that's what they call it. You can do all kinds of other different stuff, which we're not going to talk about in this video. But anyway, those are the settings that I have for this guy. Another big one that I should mention here, just to keep in mind, it doesn't really matter in this particular case, but if you look at the shell, where it's under the shell settings, you have some options. Some important options that come up pretty often is fill gaps between walls and then filter out tiny gaps. If you have little teeny tiny gaps in the model, I'm not even sure how small, but small, it will just ignore them, because otherwise it could be problematic because the printer will try and fill the gaps, but then then there might be plastic oozing out of places and it won't look good. So you could say filter out tiny gaps and then fill gaps between walls. That's basically if there's a gap where it's actually too small for one full layer, whether or not it should print there. So you could say everywhere or nowhere. I have it set to everywhere. And then also print thin walls if there's a wall that is thinner than the wall thickness, which right now we have set to 0.4 millimeters because that's the size of our nozzle tip. Is the opening is 0.4 millimeters. So if you have a line or a wall that is thinner than that, you're basically saying print it anyway. Try to print that thin wall. Right here, here's really important, Z-seam alignment. So this right here is going to determine where, let me just give you an example. This will determine where the actual seam is. So you see these openings and you're like, wait a minute, that's what's going on here, because that shouldn't be there, because it's all supposed to be printed. What? Well, they're just showing you that is where the nozzle will start and stop the print. So all these little blue, see these little blue things? Those are showing you where the nozzle is going to start and stop the print. And that's called a seam. That's called a seam. And so right now you can see that the seam is, from our perspective, it's at the bottom right-hand corner. But on here it says front right. But so let's say we change it, instead of front right, let's say we change it, because they're talking about like the front of the printer. Let's say we change it to front left. So it should move the seam over here, I think. Hey, look at that. It did. So now the seam is over there. And for a lot of models, this won't even matter, but maybe you're printing something that you want to look good, and you don't want a seam like in one of the main, areas that people are going to be looking at it. So like maybe you have text, or maybe there's like a face of a model, and you don't want the seam running through kind of the most important part. So also it could be for structural reasons. You don't want a seam in certain places, or maybe dimensional reasons. You don't want a seam to be where a part has to fit into another part. Anyway, I feel like that's way enough information about that, but just something to keep in mind. If you hear people talking about that, that's what they're talking about. You have some other options with that, but I'm going to leave it at that. So, all right. Okay, I think we've talked about everything, probably in way more detail. So this is how this model is going to be. Again, I'm not saying this is ideal, but this is how it's going to print, and we're going to try it out and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out, well, we can just slice it again and print it again. We're only going to use 9 grams of filament, which is actually kind of a lot for a motor mount. But hey, that's how it goes. You experiment, you try stuff, see if it works. And now that we've sliced it, we have our settings. We can go to the bottom right-hand corner and click Save to File. And so what we can do for naming the files, I do like the name. I don't do any spaces. Maybe I'll do some capital letters, because there's only a certain amount of space that will actually show the file name on the printer screen. So I want to be able to know what it is. And then I always do dot, in this case, CE3 for Creality Ender 3 to tell me which mount it is. And then I'll do PLA to tell me like what kind of filament I'm using, even though most of the time I use PLA. And then that should be it. And then .G code is the type of file that our printer uses. So .G code, it's going to go to my 3D printing file, and I will click save. If you want to save all of the settings and like the orientation of this model in Cura, what you want to do is go up to file and then click save project. And then you can click save, and then that's actually going to give you it's going to give you a .3mf file, which basically means if you load that file into Cura, it will pop up exactly like you saved it right now. So that could be really useful if you have multiple models on the print bed, and you're trying to like keep that orientation and stuff. So you definitely want to actually save the Cura project in that case, but I'm not going to do that right now. Okay. Wow, that was a lot of talking. Oh, one more thing that I forgot is that while you have a slider that can take you up and down through the print, you also have a slider on the bottom of the screen, hopefully you can see it there, that will allow you to actually track the print head as it prints. So it shows you, not in real time, but it shows you in this diagram, you can see what is going to be printed first, and how it's going to be printed. So in this case, it's moving, well, from our perspective, right to left. It's going to do that. It's going to do the inside, and then it's going to do the outside. Sometimes you want to do outside and then inside. So that's just a little thing to keep in mind there. Okay, so now let's move on to the next step. All right, now I'm going to take the SD card. I just popped it into the computer here. So now we have this card. This is Ender 3 SD. And so we can take our file here, our .g-code file, and just drag and drop onto the SD card. It's going to transfer in like no time because it's a pretty small file. We can eject that SD card, and now we'll take it out of the computer and we will go stick it in the 3D printer and get that set up and start printing. All right, here is the printer. Wow, that was quite a bit of Cura information, especially if you are brand new, but hopefully you are still awake and not freaking out, and we're gonna keep this party going in the next video. I'll see you over there. It should be showing up on your screen somewhere, or I will link it in the description below. We're gonna actually fire up the 3D printer and start printing, so I will see you over there.